Okay, welcome everyone. This is a special Friday night edition of the Anderson Report. I am Tim the Source Anderson. This is my YouTube channel titled appropriately The Anderson Report. I really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. There's quite a bit to talk about, obviously, between the Oval Office getting hit by coronavirus and the September jobs report, just for starters. I also broadcast on Periscope at TJ Anderson 12. And my Twitter handle is TJ Anderson 1. So if anyone is a new watcher, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the little bell right next to it. You'll get notifications of when the next broadcast is. And then you can always also watch the broadcast on replay if you're not able to watch it live. It's very frequently at 7 p.m. I did 9 p.m. this evening because there was so much activity today. I just wanted to check on a number of things before going live. And I think we're just about ready to go. I do have a slightly new video setup with a new video cam. So if you see me, if you weren't on last night and you notice that I'm glancing off to the side a little bit or making a little adjustment on occasion mid broadcast, it's all got to do with this new and improved, very, very high resolution webcam, which I'm using instead of the camera that used to be embedded in my laptop. So, of course, today started really in the middle of the night with the news that President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump had tested positive for the coronavirus. S&P stock index futures were down, let's say, over 2% almost immediately on the news. The Dow futures were down as much as 600. That's a little over 2%. I wasn't up at that hour, but S&P futures, I believe, were down maybe 2.5%. And although NASDAQ futures might have not been down that much on a percentage basis, they did get hit relatively hard during the day and finished much weaker than the Dow and the S&P, which really staged a very impressive recovery. So we also had the employment numbers for September at 8:30. And although those numbers didn't quite meet expectations on the non-farm payroll metric, which is the most widely followed jobs metric in that release, private payrolls were very good and a little bit above consensus. Specifically, non-farm payrolls came in at plus 660,000. The consensus was for 800,000 gains. Private payrolls came in at 877,000. That was a little bit better than consensus, which was 815,000. And we also had a pretty nice revision to the upside for non-farm payrolls by a combined 140,000 revision to the positive for a combination of July and August. They usually give the revisions for the 2 prior months. And again, these job numbers are almost always initially done by surveys. They survey 60,000 households and or employers. And that survey week is always the second full week of the month. So this survey was, I don't know for sure when the survey was. October 31st was a Monday. Then you had a whole week in September. Then you had Labor Day the following Monday. So if that survey week was really the second week of September, Monday would have been a holiday. I'm not absolutely sure if they did it then or if they did it the following week, which would have been the week that ended on, let's say, September 18th. I'm guessing they did it the weekend where Labor Day was a Monday, and maybe then they added on the following Monday. So that's not really terribly relevant, other than the reason we always get revisions is because because after they get the surveys, then later in the month and the following month, they get hard data from employees and employers, and that lets them refine the job numbers from the prior months. But given that they're surveys and then revised by hard data, they're usually fairly accurate. Even though that revision for July and August sounds like a lot at a plus 140,000, keep in mind that the job gains for August were plus 1.37 million. So on a percentage basis, it's not that astronomical of a number. Okay, so why do we even bother with the revisions? Well, the revisions are really very important trend indicators, because when you have prior months being revised to the upside from what the initial surveys had come in at, that usually means that you're going to have that you're in a strong uptrend for that data stream. Now, conversely, if you had revisions to the downside for the prior months, that would mean that the employment situation was probably worsening. Okay, so look, even though this non-farm payroll number came in a little bit below expectations, all right, plus 660,000, expectations were 8 to 850, private sector a little bit better. The unemployment rate dropped to 7.9 from 8.4%. Expectations were for it to be at 8.2%. So that is a positive, and certainly a positive headline, although I will say that the labor participation rate dropped. And when the labor participation rate drops, that means that some people have left the workforce, maybe out of frustration of not being able to find a job. And that usually is a boost to the that usually it helps the unemployment rate decline, just because of the way the math works. Now, we've had very strong numbers, very strong job gains over the last few months. So I think that even though we had a little bit of a miss on versus expectations for the non-farm payroll number, mild beat on private payrolls. We also had a mild beat on private payrolls from ADP on Wednesday. I still think this shows that the economy is gaining jobs. And even though that we still have the big hurdle of getting past these capacity constraints in indoor activities, bars, restaurants, social gatherings, conferences, hotels, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we're still, the employment picture is still improving, although there is still a lot of work to do. And okay, so One other interesting piece of data in this employment report was there's something called the U6 rate. And some people have probably heard of it before if you're, follow the details of the employment reports that come out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's usually considered to be the jobs report. It's almost always the first Friday of every month. And this will be the last jobs report that we get before the election, because the election is the first Tuesday in November, the in-person part of the election, that and the first Friday in November would be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days later. So depending on how the calendar falls, it's possible sometimes that it's very possible that you could have, if September 1st fell on a Monday or fell on a Wednesday or a Thursday, you would get, if November 1st fell on a Wednesday or a Thursday, you would get that October jobs report on the Friday before Election Day. But now, since November 1st falls on a weekend, you're going to get Election Day is November 3rd, and the first Friday of the month is November 5th. So I'm going to take a look just real quickly at the chat, and it's great to have everyone with us tonight. I know it's a Friday night, but I thought it was important to give a little rundown on the market and on the employment report coming in. Okay, so John Miller, yes, a very loyal follower. Thank you, John. DJ, it's great to have you in the chat. And Rick, it's good to have you in as always. So where else do we want to go here? The U6 unemployment rate. This is a rate that also tabulates what they call the long-term unemployed people who have been employed for an extended period of time and may not be still actually looking for work. This is a rate when economists talk about the structural unemployment level in the economy. These are for people that may have been disillusioned and, maybe their employment benefits have run out. Maybe they're just stopped looking and have dropped off the continuing claims rolls. So the U6 unemployment rate is both unemployed who are actively looking and those who are not actively seeking work. That's where you get your long-term unemployed. That rate declined significantly from August to September. And that was a very positive sign. I've got numbers written down for it, but they don't look right, so I'm not going to throw them out there. I just know that number was a bright spot of the report. Okay. So here's the numbers for that. In August, that rate was 14.2%. Okay. In September, it declined to 12.8%. Now, why would that rate be so much higher than what they consider the unemployment rate? Because the unemployment rate is of those people that are actively looking for work, how many of them are unemployed? That rate is at 7.9%. But then there's a whole group of people that are unemployed that are not actively looking. They are termed the structurally unemployed people. And when you add those in, that rate gets much higher. Because remember, the unemployment rate, that's why the labor force participation rate, they are people that are dropped out technically of the labor force, but are still out there and could potentially, when you see the labor force participation rate increase like it did over the last 3 or 4 months, those are people who had not been actively looking for a job that now are. Okay, so that labor force participation rate decreased this last month to 61.4% from 61.7%. So you will probably hear some economists say, look, the unemployment rate went down to 7.9, but it's only because a bunch of people left the labor force. Well, look, the rate is what it is. It's certainly a psychological positive to have that headline number drop below 8% to 7.9. Just as a point of reference, the last unemployment rate that was published going in to the I want to make sure I get this right here. Going into the 2012 election, which was when President Obama was running against Mitt Romney, that rate was 8.1%. Okay, so almost exactly the same. Right now it's 7.9. Now, where did these jobs get added? They got added to leisure and hospitality, plus 320,000 jobs. But still, that sector is still hindered by these capacity constraints that are on most restaurants and bars. And of leisure and hospitality, which could also include hotels. It could also include maybe sporting event venues. I'm not sure exactly everything that includes, but one of the subsectors among leisure and hospitality is food, services, and drinking places. Okay? For most of us, drinking places means bars. Yes. Okay. So I was waiting to get a reaction from Rick on that last comment, but I don't see it yet. So we had 320,000 job additions in leisure and hospitality. 200,000 of those were food establishments and drinking places. Now, look, Florida's going to 100% capacity. That'll probably help for the next month. But a lot of other states are still stuck at this 25, maybe 50% capacity. And some very, very high population states like New York, like California, and like a couple of other places. In fact, I don't even think California had indoor dining going into when the survey week would have been for this jobs report in the middle of September. Now, of course, they have the climate to where they can do outdoor dining a lot longer into the year than restaurants in the East Coast. And that's the big fear right now for restaurants in the East Coast, is that if their states are going to stick to tight 25% or even 50% capacities for indoor dining, outdoor dining a month from now is going to be uncomfortable. Okay, so just a couple of other categories. Plus 100,000 jobs in healthcare, plus 90,000 in professional and business services, plus 75,000 in transport and warehousing. Clearly, I read more and more about how many, even Amazon, because of all the online merchandising going on and people buying stuff online, Amazon has tons of jobs open for their warehouses, as do other big retailers that are significantly ramping up their online capabilities and their capacity to do internet jobs. Manufacturing plus 66,000. Construction was about plus 30. So manufacturing and construction combined plus 100,000 jobs. That was the September jobs report. I actually think it was a decent report, although the main headline was a little bit of a miss on the non-farm payroll number. But after very strong reports for a number of months, we're not adding those jobs at the same level that we were adding at the beginning of the recovery off the lows. That would be June, July, and even August. Okay, so Rick has made a comment about the 10-year yield. Look, the 10-year yield's holding in there at 6.80, 0.68%. I still like that, even if it went up above 0.7%. If it got up to 0.75%, I think that would be bullish. I am not concerned at all about inflation. I know Rick is. We are just not going to have. We saw the PCE numbers yesterday, where headline inflation was plus 1.4% year over year, and core inflation was plus 1.6% year over year. That sounds like it's close to 2%, but it's really, you would need to have sharp increases in some inflation metrics for those numbers to get to 2%, get above 2%, and hold above 2% long enough before the Fed would consider raising rates. So let's see. That's a lot of stuff on the jobs report. But look, it was a big report. It was the last report before going into the election. And I think it was somewhat of, maybe it didn't get the play that it might have, because there was so much financial media coverage today was focused on President Trump, Melania, and a few other people testing positive for the coronavirus. So John is asking, what is stored next week in the market? John, it's just going to be, it's very, very hard to project now with the markets. Look, major market averages were up for the week. The NASDAQ, even the NASDAQ composite, down 250 points today, but it was net up for the week. Now, I didn't write what that was for the week, because we did a pretty thorough discussion on how we ended the month of September and how we ended the third quarter. The last day for both of those events was Wednesday. Thursday was the first day of the fourth quarter. This was the second day of the fourth quarter. So I didn't do the weekly numbers, but I know that the NASDAQ and the S&P were both up for the week. The S&P broke a 4-week losing streak. The Dow was also up for the week. The Russell was up for the week. I'm pretty sure. Yes, it was, of course. So let's go over what exactly happened today, and then we'll talk a little bit about what could be in store for next week. But I think there's so many unknowns and so many variables that are, so many wild cards that could still come at us. It's, look, Monday is a long ways away. The Dow was down, as I mentioned, the Dow futures, middle of the night, 1 o'clock, 1:15, 1:30 a.m. I was not up then, but they went down 600 points immediately after the news that President Trump and Melania had tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, by the time the market opened, I think the lows for the Dow was down about 450 points, maybe a little bit more than that. We got some of that back in the first 45 minutes, and then we gradually improved over the next hour and a half. The Dow actually went positive at one point in time, and it was really hovering between, it was kind of toggling that unchanged line. It was up 50 points. It was down 50 points. And then it lost a little steam late in the day. The Dow was down 135 points. That's half of 1%. It still had a positive week. It went out at 27,682. The S&P 500 was down a little bit more. It was down 1%. The S&P 500 went out at 3348. Let's call it 3350, just below 3350. Now, remember yesterday, the S&P 500 closed at 3381. Okay? The old all-time February 19th was 3386. I think that 3386 level is going to be a resistance level on further rallies, and it's a level to look at if we have a couple of strong days next week on the S&P. Can we get through 3386? And just to make it a little convincing, can the S&P 500 post a close above 3,400 and hold it for a few days to maybe build off it? Okay, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that 3386, and let's just call it 3386 to 3,400 on the S&P 500. I want to see it get through that level and hold that level, not just get through it for one day and fail the next. So the S&P closed just below 3350. It was down 1%. Big cap tech got hit hard today. The stocks that have not acted that well recently, even though everybody was talking, it was so interesting because everybody was talking early in the day, oh, the coronavirus, if Trump can get it, anybody can get it. Now everybody's anxiety is going to increase about the potential of getting the coronavirus. Well, look, President Trump does a tremendous amount of events. He meets a tremendous amount of people. Sure, they're all tested from time to time, but something slips through the cracks. You don't know if he got this virus Wednesday, if he got it, if it's directly related to when Hope Hicks tested positive, and if he got it from being on Air Force One the same time that she was on Air Force One. You just don't know. And it's not something that somebody is going to be able to pinpoint as to where exactly it came from. But so the talk for the first half of the day was, well, we got to really think about these stay-at-home stocks and these telecommuting stocks and all of these stocks that drove the NASDAQ higher, that were a play, what I call the internet traffic trade, from people working at home for longer periods of time, staying at home, streaming Netflix a zillion hours a week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is those stocks got hit hard today. People took profits in the stocks that have been some of the big drivers, the big mega cap, mega growth NASDAQ names. Even some of the cloud names, after they were up very strongly in the morning, that cloud ETF, CLOU, closed at near its low of the day. And I think maybe down a little bit after being up well over 1% early in the day. Apple was down over 3%. Tesla was down 7.5%. So, and I didn't write down a lot of others, but look, the NASDAQ Composite lost 250 points today. That's 2.2%. That's twice the decline of the S&P 500. Okay. The NASDAQ went out at 11,075. So it's like kind of maybe right at its 50-day moving average again after being close to 2% above it. Jonathan, what's the prediction for the market? Well, it depends on what your time frame is, and I'll tell you, we were just talking about this. we don't have, I don't have a prediction for next week. All I try to really do is tell you what things to look at and what indicators are going to be important in terms of uh, influencing the direction of the market, and what sectors to look at, and how to identify if certain areas of the market are having relative strength or relative weakness. And the reason that next week is particularly difficult to predict is that I think the market is going to hinge a lot on how serious, if serious at all, President Trump's case of coronavirus affects him and affects his health and affects the prospects of having the second debate on time or within a couple days of when it's scheduled, and or allowing him to return to the campaign trail in for the last 2 weeks at least of the campaign before November 3rd. And this diagnosis was just made really in the middle of the night. He mentioned at one point yesterday, early in the evening, he'd been tested positive when asked about Hope Hicks. And he said, I've been tested positive. So is Melania. We'll get our results in a couple hours. And then he tweeted out at about 1:00 that he and Melania both tested positive. So he's now at Walter Reed under an abundance of caution that's the official statement from the White House and everybody else involved, that he's going to probably have some intravenous therapeutic treatment. And there's also a totally capable wing at Walter Reed that is completely secure, almost like a duplicate of the Oval Office, although it's probably not oval, where he can conduct presidential business the same way he could if he was on Air Force One. And they feel that that's just the best place for him to be for the next 3 to 4 days, at least, to monitor what his condition is and to see if he's going to develop any further complications. And I think that any follow-up from his condition will very likely have a significant impact on what the market does next week. Do you see deficits for the fiscal year? John, I'll get to that in a minute. So I mentioned the NASDAQ down. The Russell 2000, I got to be honest with you, it did surprise me that the Russell 2000 outperformed the rest of the market. And it was actually up on the day, gained 0.5%. The Russell went out at 1539. I think that's a little bit above its 50-day moving average. First time it's been above it since really early September. And the fact that the Russell gained 0.5% was reinforced by the fact that the advanced decline stats for the market were positive for the day. You had the Dow Jones down 0.5%. You had the S&P down 1%. You had the NASDAQ composite down 2.2%. The advanced declines at the New York Stock Exchange, you had 1,900 advancers and 1,100 decliners. That's a little bit less than 2-to-1 positive. Even the advanced declines on NASDAQ, 3,400 stocks on NASDAQ. The NASDAQ composite, which is a capitalization weighted index of all stocks on NASDAQ, had declined 2.2%. On NASDAQ, you had 1,600 advancing issues and 1,800 decliners. So it was only negative by 200 issues. So that really tells you that the majority of the selling in NASDAQ were these mega cap, mega growth technology names, the ones that have been driving what we've been calling the internet traffic trade. I just happened to notice, after the close, Apple down over 3%, Tesla down 7.5%. I'm sure a number of other stocks had declines of 2.5% to 3%, maybe a couple of them a little bit more. And we will just, look, you would expect that if Trump testing positive for the coronavirus was going to spark a fear that the economy was going to really slow down and that we were going to have more of a potential for more shutdowns by some states or localities, municipalities, whatever, that the Russell would have been hit harder than the overall market. And the stay-at-home stocks, the stocks that drive the internet traffic trade, might have had really, really good days. And they were having good days. Some of them, particularly the cloud names, were very strong during the first couple of hours and then had a reversal to the downside. So I think that one of the reasons was that there's been this big impasse on the Stimulus 4.0 plan. And you had comments from Nancy Pelosi during the mid-morning that she had contacted the airline industry has big problems because they had a bailout. I'm not going to call it a bailout. They had an aid package that was in one of the coronavirus emergency spending bills that was passed months ago, where they were going to get a bunch of money to give them basically a lifeline until people to get them to the point of when people are much more comfortable flying and traveling. That might not be until we get a vaccine or until an outbreak of cases drops off significantly. Now, even though we've had an outbreak of cases in some areas and so forth, hospitalizations have been at a much, much, much smaller rate of those people testing positive than what we had in March, April, and May. But Pelosi said today that she had contacted the airlines and told them to hold off on their layoffs, which they had said about a week and a half ago that they're going to have to lay people off October 1st. And these are numbers in the tens of thousands if they can't get more government loans to hold them off. They were a beneficiary of the CARES Act. They were a beneficiary of PPE money. But even though the TSA numbers have been improving, and they did improve again for Thursday over the prior Thursday, but they're improving week over week by maybe like less than 5%. So they're still only running at like 40% traffic of what they were running, full capacity like a year ago. So they've got big issues. They have big cash burns, and they need more government loans. I'm not going to call it a bailout. They need more government loans to hold off furloughing tens of thousands of people. Pelosi said that she went to the airline executives today and said, hold off on it. A big federal aid package is going to be coming very shortly. So that helped the industrial side of the market today. It helped a lot of the material stocks, and it helped the airlines. The transport, Dow Jones transports, gained 0.8% today. That was being after starting the day with a significant loss. The industrials gained 1.1%. Energy gained 1%. It had gotten crushed again yesterday. And even though crude oil lost 4.5% today, crude oil traded down to 37. The energy stocks had gotten hit so hard on Thursday, they actually gained 1% today. The material stocks gained 0.8%. They acted much better than the overall market. Even the financials gained 0.7%. I think that was all based on the fact that there was some signaling from Pelosi that an aid package, she specifically mentioned the airlines, but she also made a comment to the effect that this changes the landscape significantly. Talking about Trump having the coronavirus, this changes the landscape significantly for an aid package or for a stimulus 4.0 negotiation. And I think it was also very helpful that Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin has not tested positive for the coronavirus and is not even under a CDC guideline of a 14-day quarantine because he has not been in close contact personally with the president over the last week or with other people that have tested positive. So it's very possible that he will be negotiating with Pelosi through the weekend. We'll just have to see. But I think that's why the industrial side of the market acted better than the overall market. And then why a lot of the, look, there was some profit taking in the tech stocks and in the big internet names. So, that's, I think, kind of where we are. I mean, it's 9:42. I'm going to look at a couple of other questions. So, John, I don't have a prediction for the market, but I think the things to look at, I'm going to go back to this. What do we look at next week? Look, we got to look at what's the prognosis for Trump Monday and Tuesday? Is he still at Walter Reed? What are his doctors and the chief of staff and the press secretary saying about his condition? It's, I think he's generally a very, very healthy, very strong guy. Clearly, he's a little overweight. There's no doubt about that. And he is 74. So he's in an age group where the virus has been more difficult for people in that age group on a lot of occasions than others, although well over 98% of the people in that capacity survive it, unless they have other significant health issues or what they call comorbidities. So I think that that's going to be a big factor. And also, is there really serious progress on negotiations between Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin on a stimulus 4.0 platform program, and specifically a aid package for the airlines so they can avoid laying off tens of thousands of people? Yeah, Alex, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories that the left is talking about on Trump. There's clearly the crazies on social media can, I just think they're to be ignored right now. So that'll be a big thing to look at for next week. And also to see, it's going to be October 3rd. Earnings season really won't start. I don't think it'll start the end of next week. I think it'll start the beginning of the following week. You'll have earnings from the big banks. The Fed said just a couple of days ago that they want the banks to hold off for another quarter on buying back stock or increasing their buybacks or increasing their dividends. I think that the Fed wants the banks to conserve as much capital as possible in case the economy has real issues gaining steam or improving to the next level. But I also think that it's we're 6 months from when the virus was really in full steam. It's let's see, it was March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So we're 6 months from when the coronavirus was really gaining tremendous traction, tremendous issues with hospitalizations, et cetera. We know a lot more about it than we did 6 months ago. The economy's made great improvement off the March lows. The market initially rallied hard off those March lows. The economy really started to kick into gear in May. So if the market is a predictive indicator looking 4 to 6 months in advance, it's November. It's the beginning of October. We get out into the beginning of April, which is 6 months from now. There's probably going to be a vaccine and or very, very strong therapeutics. We're going to even know a lot more about how to treat the virus with therapeutics, even if a vaccine isn't yet totally approved and widely distributed. And the economy is going to be in better shape 6 months from now than it is today. So I think one thing what we'd have to look at next week is if we get any pre-announcements from companies that are set to report earnings later in the month. And then, of course, we just got to look at the data, and I don't have the calendar right in front of me. But I will go over some of that early next week. So that's about all I have right now. I want to thank everyone for joining the program. This is the Anderson Report. This is my YouTube channel titled The Anderson Report. If you're a first-time watcher, you can hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it, and you'll get notifications of when the next broadcast is. I also stream on Periscope on TJ Anderson 12. And I want to thank everyone for their support. I'm going to be traveling a little bit the next week and a half. I'm only just going back out to Michigan, but I may be doing a show Sunday night. If that's the case, I'll make sure to put a notification in by mid-afternoon. And I will be broadcasting from out there during next week. So everyone, please enjoy your weekend. And we will be speaking with you again next week.